He had bought everything worth buying: hotels, islands, a small airline, and once, reportedly, a senator. But the one thing that stopped him cold on a rainy Tuesday morning in Portland, Oregon, was a handwritten note taped to a bakery window. It read, "If you are standing here without an umbrella and the rain is winning, come inside. Coffee is on me." Dominic Hale had not read a handwritten note in 11 years. His assistant handled all paper communication. He had not accepted charity in 32. He had not felt genuinely seen by another human being in longer than he could remember. He stood there in the rain, 6'2", worth $4 billion and completely motionless, staring at that note like it was written in a language he had forgotten he once spoke. Then the door opened, and a woman with flour on her cheek and no idea who he was said, "You're getting soaked. Are you coming in or not?" And Dominic Hale, CEO of Hale Global Ventures, the man who had once made a room full of investors go silent just by adjusting his cufflinks, stepped inside a bakery called the Crumb and Kettle and didn't leave for 3 hours. This is not a story about a billionaire rescuing a struggling small business. This is a story about a woman who had no idea she was the one doing the rescuing. Portland in November is the kind of city that tests your relationship with yourself. The rain doesn't fall dramatically. It arrives quietly, persistently, like a thought you keep pushing away that keeps coming back. The streets of the Pearl District glistened under gray skies, and the morning commuters moved quickly, heads down, collars up. Dominic Hale had arrived in Portland at 5:47 that morning on a private flight from Singapore. He had slept 4 hours. His deal, a waterfront mixed-use development valued at $280 million, had collapsed at the 11th hour when his lead investor pulled out, citing market instability. The phrase had tasted like rust in his mouth. His driver was circling the block. His assistant, Marcus, was on the phone with the legal team in New York. Dominic had stepped out of the car at a red light, just to breathe, he told himself, and somehow found himself 3 blocks from where he started. Standing in front of a small bakery with warm amber light spilling from its windows. He was wearing a $4,000 overcoat, but it was the wrong kind for genuine rain, something that looked waterproof in a boardroom and wasn't. His shoes, Italian leather, custom last, were not meant for puddles. He was soaked in the specific way that only happens when you've been somewhere you weren't planning to be. And then he saw the note, hand-lettered in blue marker on cream-colored cardstock, protected by a small piece of transparent tape at each corner. Someone had taken care placing it. It wasn't an afterthought, it was an invitation. "If you are standing here without an umbrella and the rain is winning, come inside. Coffee is on me." Dominic read it twice, then a third time. He was not a sentimental man. He had not been shaped by warmth or small gestures. He had been shaped by boardrooms and quarterly targets, and the particular loneliness of people who confuse power with connection. But something about the note, the specificity of it, the complete lack of agenda, the gentle assumption that being caught in the rain was not a personal failure, but simply a Tuesday, undid something in him he hadn't known was tightly wound. The door opened before he could make a decision. She was perhaps 5'4", wearing a dark green apron dusted with cinnamon sugar and flour. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical braid, though several strands had escaped and curled near her temples from the kitchen heat. She had the kind of face that registers before you can categorize it, not conventionally beautiful by magazine standards, but so completely alive, so immediately present, that looking at her felt like turning on a lamp in a dim room. "You're getting soaked," she said, not unkindly, more the way you'd speak to a golden retriever who had wandered too close to the surf. "Are you coming in or not?" Yes," Dominic said. He stepped inside. The Crumb and Kettle was small, maybe 16 tables, none of them matching, and smelled of cardamom and browned butter and the kind of coffee that's been roasted somewhere you'd want to visit. A hand-painted menu board dominated one wall. A small chalkboard near the register listed the daily special. "Roasted pear and brie galette. Ask nicely, and I'll warm it for you." Dominic stood just inside the door, water dripping from his coat, and looked around with the same methodical attention he gave to acquisition targets. He was processing, he could not help it. The woman had already returned behind the counter and was pouring coffee into a mug, ceramic, handmade. The kind with an uneven rim that someone had chosen because it was beautiful. Not because it was efficient. "Here," she said, sliding it toward him. "Don't argue. The note meant it." He walked to the counter and accepted the mug with both hands. The warmth moved through his palms immediately. He realized only then how cold he had been. "Thank you," Dominic said. The words felt unfamiliar in his mouth. Not because he was rude, he had been trained in every form of courtesy, but because he usually said them automatically, without actually feeling the corresponding gratitude. He felt it now. "Sit wherever," she said, already turning back to the kitchen. "I have a second batch of galettes in the oven. Shout if you need anything." She didn't ask his name. She didn't seem curious about his coat or his phone or the discreet rectangular outline of a corporate card in his jacket. She didn't treat him like someone important. She treated him like someone who was wet. Dominic Hale sat down at a small table near the window, and for the first time in 11 months, he did not open his phone. Her name, he learned gradually and without asking, was Nora Callahan. He learned this from 3 things. The small nameplate on the counter that read Nora she her, ask me about the sourdough, from Mrs. Park at the corner table, who called out, "Nora, love, is that lavender in today's scone?" And from the young man with the delivery box who arrived at the back door and announced himself as Santiago. Here for Nora Callahan's Tuesday flour order. She had been running the Crumb and Kettle for 7 years. Dominic could deduce this from the worn edges of the menu boards, the particular depth of the groove in the wooden floor between the counter and the oven, and the effortless authority with which she moved through the space. This was not someone building something. This was someone who had already built it. At around 9 in the morning, the rain thickened and the bakery filled, not rushed, but steadily, the way a tide comes in. A pair of architects with blueprints. A woman writing in a notebook so intently she didn't look up when her scone arrived. 2 retired men playing chess on a board they'd clearly brought from home. A young mother nursing a baby while reading a battered paperback propped against the sugar jar. Nora moved between all of them with an ease that Dominic found himself studying in the way he studied operational excellence. Not admiringly, exactly, but with the professional recognition of someone watching a system work perfectly. She remembered, without writing anything down, that the chess players liked their coffee black and their scones without raisins. She asked the nursing mother if she'd like the window shade adjusted. She refilled the architect's pot of tea without being asked and pointed at the blueprints with good-natured curiosity. "Is that the building on 11th? The one they're converting to apartments?" she said. "You know it," the architect asked, surprised. "I walk past it every morning," Nora said simply. "I always thought the original facade was worth keeping," the architect lit up. "That's exactly what we're fighting for." They talked for 4 minutes. Nora listened with her full attention, a rare and increasingly endangered form of human behavior, and then excused herself to check on the galettes. Dominic watched all of this. His phone had vibrated 14 times. He was aware of this the way you're aware of a fly in a room, peripherally, without urgency. At 9:45, Nora appeared at his table with a small plate. "You've been sitting with an empty mug for 20 minutes, she said. "Galette, you don't have to pay for it. Consider it a continuation of the note's spirit." Dominic looked at the galette. Roasted pear brie, the pastry golden and irregular in the way that told you it had been made by hand. A small drizzle of honey crossed the top. "This is very kind," he said. "You don't even know me." "No," Nora agreed. "That's sort of the point, isn't it? Kindness that requires knowing someone first isn't really kindness, it's loyalty." "Different thing." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat, which surprised him. "My second in command is here now," she explained, nodding toward a young man who had emerged from the kitchen. "I get 20 minutes. I'm Nora, by the way." "Dominic," he said. "Just passing through Portland, Dominic, or do you live here?" "Just passing through." "Business, good business or bad business?" He paused. In 11 years, no one had asked him that without already knowing the answer. "Bad," he said. "A deal fell apart this morning." "I'm sorry," Nora said, and she meant it, he could tell. Because her expression didn't shift into the particular form of sympathy that is actually just pity wearing better clothes. "Is it fixable?" "Most things are," he said. "The question is whether they're worth fixing." Nora tilted her head. "That's a harder question than it looks." "Yes," Dominic agreed. It is. They talked for 18 minutes. Not about his company or his portfolio or his net worth, none of which she had any apparent awareness of. They talked about Portland's rain, which Nora said she had initially moved here to escape and had instead fallen completely in love with. About sourdough starters and how they behave like personalities, temperamental, particular, requiring relationship rather than management. About a book she was reading, a biography of a little-known botanist from the 1800s who had documented 500 species of Andean plants and received almost no credit during her lifetime. The world kept trying to make her smaller, Nora said, and she just kept working. I find that comforting somehow. Why comforting? Dominic asked. Nora considered this. Because the work survived, she said. The world's opinion of it didn't change what it was. Dominic ate the galette. It was, without question, the best thing he had tasted in 2 years. He said so. Nora grinned. The pears are from a farm 40 minutes outside the city. The woman who runs it is 81 years old and still climbs the trees herself. She paused. I'd like to be that when I'm 81, still climbing. His driver found him at 11:15. Marcus, his assistant, was on the verge of filing a missing persons report, which was dramatic. But Marcus was that kind of assistant, thorough to the point of catastrophe. Dominic paid for the coffee and the galette. Nora tried to stop him, and he insisted, and left the Crumb and Kettle feeling something he did not have an immediate word for. Not happy, exactly. Lighter, perhaps, like a window had been cracked in a room that had been sealed too long. In the car, Marcus handed him his phone. 14 missed calls, 23 emails. 3 text messages from his board chair that ranged from concerned to quietly furious. Dominic looked at all of it and then looked out the car window at the wet Portland streets and thought about what Nora had said. The work survived. He rebuilt the deal in 48 hours. Found a replacement investor through a contact in Vancouver he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Restructured the terms in a way that was, arguably, better than what the original deal had offered. His legal team called it remarkable. His board chair called it vintage Dominic. His assistant Marcus called his mother to tell her the crisis was over. Dominic flew back to New York. Closed 3 other deals in 10 days. Gave a keynote address at a business conference in Chicago that received a standing ovation. Life resumed its ordinary enormity. And yet, on a Thursday morning 3 weeks later, he found himself rerouting a Seattle flight through Portland. Technical stop, he told Marcus, who was too experienced to believe him but too professional to say so. The Crumb and Kettle was exactly as he remembered. Same amber light, same hand-painted menu. Same note in the window, slightly newer looking. She must replace it periodically, offering the same unconditional invitation to the umbrella-less and the rain-defeated. Nora looked up when he walked in and recognized him with an expression of genuine surprise, not starstruck, just human. You came back, she said. The galette was exceptional, Dominic said. Nora smiled. It usually is. He sat at the same table. She was busier today, a Thursday crowd, locals in deep conversation. A group of college students with laptops and the earnest energy of people who believe the right podcast might change their lives. Nora moved through all of it with the same unaffected competence he remembered. When she had 20 minutes, she joined him again. This time they talked about his work, she asked directly, without apology. And he found himself being more honest than he intended, telling her about the deal that had collapsed. About the restructuring, about the particular loneliness of succeeding so consistently that people stopped expecting you to struggle. Does it feel good? She asked. The winning? It used to, he said. Now it mostly just feels like the next thing. Nora looked at him steadily. What's the last thing you did that didn't feel like the next thing? Dominic was quiet for a moment. Walking into this bakery 3 weeks ago, he said honestly. Nora held his gaze. She didn't fill the silence with reassurance or deflection. She let the honesty sit there and breathe, which was, Dominic realized, the rarest thing anyone had done for him in years. Then you probably needed it, she said finally, simply. I think I did, he agreed. He came back a 3rd time, then a 4th. He stopped pretending there was a technical stop. He told Marcus he was visiting Portland on personal business, which was true. And Marcus, who had worked for him for 9 years and had the emotional intelligence of a very wise owl, said, Of course, sir. without any of the 15 follow-up questions he would normally ask. By the 5th visit, Nora knew how he took his coffee. By the 6th, she had stopped explaining the daily special and simply brought what she thought he'd like, always correctly. By the 7th, they were talking for an hour, and Dominic had rescheduled a conference call twice without a trace of guilt. He had not, however, told her who he was, not fully. She knew his name. She knew he was in business, and that it involved large sums and frequent travel. She had not, apparently, Googled him, which he found extraordinary and also quietly terrifying, because it meant whatever she thought of him was based entirely on who he actually was in her presence. He hadn't felt that kind of exposure since he was 26, and building his first company in a basement apartment with maxed-out credit cards and more ambition than sense. The complication arrived on his 8th visit in the form of a journalist. Her name was Priya Mehta, and she wrote for a national business magazine that Dominic knew well because it had profiled him 3 times. She was in Portland covering a tech conference and had wandered into the Crumb and Kettle for coffee. She looked up from her laptop to see Dominic Hale, 4th on the most recent Forbes Billionaires list, famously private. Famously formidable, sitting across a small table from a woman with flour on her apron, laughing at something she had said. Priya Mehta, to her credit, did not immediately reach for her phone. She watched for a moment, then she did reach for her phone. 2 days later, a small item appeared online under the headline. Billionaire Dominic Hale's mystery Portland visits. Who is the baker he can't stay away from? Dominic was on a flight when it published. Marcus sent it to him with a subject line that was just one word: incoming. The story named the Crumb and Kettle. It named Nora Callahan. By the time Dominic landed, the bakery had received 412 Instagram tags, a call from a morning television program, and 17 voicemails from journalists, ranging from politely curious to aggressively persistent. Nora, Dominic learned through a panicked call from his PR team, had declined every interview request. She had put a sign on the door reading, "We are a bakery, not a story. Galettes available." No comment provided. He called her. She picked up on the 2nd ring. "You could have told me," she said. She didn't sound angry. She sounded like someone trying to decide if they'd been deceived. "I could have," Dominic said. "I didn't know how to do it without it changing everything." A pause. "Does it change everything?" "I hope not," he said. "That's the truest thing I can offer you." Another pause. "Come to Portland," Nora said. "Not to explain, just come. We'll figure out if it changes anything in person." He arrived the next morning. The bakery was closed. Nora had taken the day off for the first time in 6 months, she told him. A fact delivered with the slightly indignant tone of someone who is annoyed at themselves for doing something necessary. She met him at the door in civilian clothes, jeans, a worn navy sweater, her hair loose, and she looked, if anything, more herself than she did in her apron. She led him inside, and the Crumb and Kettle without customers was a different and equally beautiful thing. Quiet, smelling of yesterday's bread and the morning's first pot of coffee. They sat at his usual table. "Tell me," Nora said, "everything, no version of yourself that you think I'll be comfortable with, just the actual thing." So Dominic did. He told her about the company he had built, and what it had cost him, 2 relationships, 1 friendship he still grieved, and a version of himself that used to know how to sit still without feeling like he was failing. He told her about his family, a mother in Connecticut who called every Sunday and deserved more than he gave her. A younger brother who had chosen a quiet life as a middle school science teacher, and seemed, as far as Dominic could tell, genuinely happy in a way that Dominic envied without understanding. He told her about the note in her window, about standing in the rain and reading it 3 times and feeling, for the first time in longer than he could name, like someone was speaking directly to him without wanting anything back. "I didn't know you'd walk in," Nora said quietly. "I know," he said. "That's why it worked." Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're very difficult to be afraid of in person. Should you be afraid of me?" According to the internet, apparently. The article described you as notoriously unsentimental. "The internet hasn't seen me eat a roasted pear galette," Dominic said. Nora laughed, a real laugh, the kind that doesn't perform itself, and something that had been held tightly in Dominic's chest for the past 48 hours released. "What do you want, Dominic?" Nora asked, not confrontationally. The way she asked because she genuinely wanted to know, he thought about it honestly. I want to keep coming back, he said. I want to keep talking to you. I want whatever this is to have the chance to find out what it is. I run a bakery, Nora said. My world is very small and I love it that way. My world is very large, Dominic said, and I'm beginning to think that's been a problem. He paused. I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking if there's room in yours for someone who's just beginning to understand that size isn't the same thing as meaning. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Outside, Portland's rain had resumed, gentle, persistent, patient. There's a farmer's market Saturday morning, she said at last. The woman with the pear trees will be there. She's extraordinary. You could come if you don't have a flight. I don't have a flight, Dominic said. He did, of course. Marcus canceled it in the time it took him to finish the sentence. Nora stood and moved to the kitchen. Then I'll make coffee, she said. Proper coffee, not the notes coffee. The kind you make for someone you're beginning to know. Dominic sat at his usual table in the Crumb and Kettle, listening to the rain and the sound of someone who expected nothing of him doing something generous for him anyway. And he understood, quietly and completely, that he had not come here 8 times because the deal had fallen apart. He had come here because something had, without warning, fallen together. Outside the window, the note was still there. If the rain is winning, come inside. He had come inside. And for the first time in 11 years, he had no plan for what happened next. He found, to his considerable surprise, that he wasn't afraid of that at all. Some stories begin with grand gestures, flowers, declarations, impossible odds dramatically overcome. But some of the truest ones begin with a piece of cardstock and a blue marker and a woman who decided, on a rainy October morning, that extending kindness to strangers was more important than the risk that it might cost her something. Nora Callahan never set out to change anyone's life. She set out to make good bread and offer a warm room to whoever needed one. And in doing so, she gave a man who had everything a glimpse of the one thing he had forgotten to want. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who might need it today. Leave a like if you believe that small acts of kindness carry more weight than the world usually gives them credit for. Subscribe for new stories every week, stories about ordinary moments that turn out to be anything but. And wherever you're watching from, if the rain is winning today, we hope you have somewhere warm to go.